In the security news this week, how do we handle scope creep for vulnerabilities? Find the bugs before it hits the real world. Risk or hype vulnerabilities. An RTL-SDR in your browser. Using AI to hack AI and protect AI. 73 vulnerabilities of which 0 patches have been issued. Spinning cats. Bypassing WDAC with Teams and JavaScript. Rust will solve all of our security problems. Did you hear some Signal chats were leaked? Ingress nginx robot dogs. What happens to your 23andMe data? Oracle's cloud was hacked, despite what Oracle PR says. Inside the SCIF and cvemap to the rescue. All that and more on this episode of Paul Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Coming to you from Purgatory Studios in semi-high definition, compliments of Darth Vader himself, this is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 867, being recorded on Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. I'm Paul Asadorian.
It's not what the teleprompter says.
It does not, because the teleprompter talks about when it's going to be published, and I'm talking about when we're recording. So there. Take that. Larry Pesch is here with me in studio.
Yes, and is this really Purgatory Studios anymore?
No, we still need to. It's just my time.
We need to give it a name.
We're talking more seriously about it, if that's any indication.
Yes,
what's going to happen.
Yes, we are.
We need to take some actions. Speaking of action, Mr. Action himself, Mr. Bill Swearingen, is here with us.
Hey, Mr. Action here. Thanks for having me, Paul. Glad to be here.
Mr. Sam Bound is here with us.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Mr. Jeff Mann is here.
Chomping at the bit as usual. Let's go.
Lee Neely is here with us.
Ready to rock and roll. Let's do this.
And coming up soon is Identiverse 2025, returning to Las Vegas June 3rd through the 6th. Hear from 250 expert speakers and connect with 3,000 plus identity professionals across 4 days of keynotes, breakout sessions, and deep dives into the latest identity security trends. Plus, take part in a hands-on workshop and explore brand new non-human identity pavilion. Register now and save 25% with the code IDV25-SecurityWeekly at securityweekly.com/IDV2025, which is kind of interesting. And I apologize in advance because now you have to make the decision between, well, I guess you always did, between Identiverse and RVASec. But just before the show, I got an acceptance of my talk to RVASec. So I will likely be there to give my talk.
So now we know which one to go to.
It is the same dates as Identiverse, unfortunately. So I think it's a different audience. For
sure.
Identity people are great, and they should go to Identityverse. But, you know,
what's your talk on, Paul?
So my talk is on. Now you're going to want to go to Identiverse. My talk is called
It
the
all
Linux
depends on if we can
Desktop.
identify with it.
The Linux Desktop for Security Professionals, and it's based on my several years in the making, converting from Windows and Mac OS to Linux as my desktop of choice.
Two things.
And compelling reasons why I believe more, and I'm targeting to security professionals, right? So why more security professionals should embrace Linux for the desktop. Maybe you never will, and that's fine.
Yep.
Right? And there'll probably be another talk that you can go to, and I won't be offended.
I remember a day when a security
took you 2 years.
professional wouldn't be called dead not being on Linux.
Well, I think many of us use Linux. What I'm suggesting is Linux as what we call your daily driver.
Yeah.
Right? So I converted my laptops in 2016 and my desktop in 2019 and have been using exclusively Linux on my desktop, and have done Linux stuff for 25 or longer than I care to admit. And so that's kind of my.
So you're giving a whole talk on how Linux is now capable of writing Word documents and PowerPoint slides?
No,
because it's not.
All that's in the cloud anyway. So
I felt so. I'm going to probably do another poll, but I did put it out there, and that is one thing that people still say about Linux. And I felt like an evangelist for OnlyOffice. If you haven't checked out OnlyOffice, it's what I use when I need to access local Office documents, and it works great. Better than I think there's a whole history behind LibreOffice, OpenOffice. That, from what I've heard, and I heard that recently on a Linux podcast I listened to, I think it was Floss Weekly. It sounded like a hot mess. OnlyOffice is awesome and doesn't suffer from a lot of that lineage.
And
so I think a lot of it's just like, dispelling some myths. I'm not trying to convert everyone into running Linux desktop, but maybe some people are on the fence. But also, Windows 10 will be end of support in October of 2025.
Yep.
So if you don't have things like a TPM 2.0 and you don't want to throw away your hardware, this is another reason that's really what kind of tipped the scales for me of Paul's finally going to give this talk. Like I've been thinking about it for a year or two now. And now I'm like, okay, now's the time.
And there's the talk, Paul. So now you can go to Deniverse.
This sounds like a hell of an excuse to sidestep upgrading to Windows 11 there, Paul. I mean, that's
Well, I mean, if you don't have a
if you don't have the
TPM
supported
2.0.
hardware, right? If you don't have the supported hardware, you can't go to Windows 11.
Well, yeah, it was worse than that. My wife had her laptop that we don't use very often. It's got the TPM 2.0 chip. It's got the 4 gigs of memory. It's got enough disk space. It's got a fast enough CPU, but it's the wrong version of the Intel i5, which is unsupported. It's like, say, what?
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that there was other. I knew there was other ones. I didn't realize that
They have only a set list of CPUs they support. I
Is
don't
that
know
for
why.
security features? That must be for security features in the processor, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Because who would do anything less than 8 gigs on a Core i5 at this point?
well,
Like,
yeah,
really?
but if it was a Core i5 you bought about 8 years ago,
Oh,
but yeah, and yes, I
bet
can
you
put
Linux would
Linux
run
on
great
it,
on
but
it.
remember which user it is.
right.
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 So if she asks, we'll get a new laptop.
But only if
Because-
she asks.
Yeah, well, she does sleep with her IT support staff.
Hell yeah.
I wanted to.
I love that.
let's move on really quickly, Paul.
The full disclosure mailing list. Speaking of full disclosure mailing list had an interesting post, and this was an update to a CVE that was carries a 2019 moniker. I say it that way because it doesn't mean it was necessarily made public in 2019, which is one of the issues that we have with CVE. But this is CVE 2019. 16261 is an unauthenticated post request in a trip-light UPS system. What was discovered was that this vulnerability is in other PDU firmware, power distribution units, and so they're also vulnerable. So this is an expanded scope for a likely 6-year-old vulnerability. And the new functionality on some of the newly discovered targets that are vulnerable allows attackers to change the admin or manager passwords, shut power off to an outlet, or disable or enable services. What I think would be an interesting attack is if you changed all the passwords and then turn the power off. I'm not suggesting that people do that. I'm just saying if I put my evil hat on, that's where I'm going. With this one, but my question is, are we picking up on these, right? Are we, as IT and security people, getting notified that a 6-year-old vulnerability now has an increased scope, and therefore I have to go look for these devices in my environment, right? This is likely going to get funneled to, in larger organizations like the infrastructure security team would be my guess.
Hypothetically, what was the severity or CVSS score? How many years ago was that? 6 years ago when it was issued?
Let's see. And let's see if it, I wonder if it changed.
And yeah, that's my next question.
9.1 critical for CVS
back
version
then,
3.
NVD scored it as a 9.1 critical in the 3x. There is no version 4 score for
What about 2?
it.
What about CVE version 2?
CVE version 2 is an 8.5 high.
Yep.
So it
That's
should
That's
have
still
been
one. That's still one that
fixed
should be on your radar.
6
right?
years ago.
But so CVE modified. So the description was modified by MITRE, and a reference was added to, I believe. I wonder what that link is.
Don't click the link.
I know. I did click the link.
3/19/2025 was the
Was
date.
the update? It was the report that lists the expanded scope was added. So was the full disclosure list was added on March 20th. So the score was not updated according to the record, Jeff.
Or the score was updated and it remained the same?
Well, yeah, because it's probably just it's not changing the severity. It's just changing the scope of what products are affected.
Correct.
So that wouldn't necessarily impact the score.
Right.
Right.
So I'm still a little, why is this a thing? The scope has changed. They found this particular vulnerability type, category, deficiency, weakness in different products. And so that's what you're saying. The
It
scope has
sounds like the
changed?
same so Triplite is the company. And so they found that this vulnerability exists not just in UPSs, but PDUs as well. I forget which came first, the PDU or the UPS.
Looks like the PDU was first.
And then the UPS was the expanded.
So in theory, 6 years ago, it was discovered on certain devices. They were patched. And you're saying now they discovered the problem on different
Yeah, the scope
devices.
has changed.
Correct. That's interesting. Disclosures being submitted to expand upon additional affected products. It doesn't say if these were patched on the new expanded scope. I would hope that Triplite would now issue patches.
Which is
Does it have an archive or a history that it had patches 6 years ago for the other things?
I didn't dig into
Probably.
it that deep, but now you're making me want to dig into it that deep.
So I thought I
Inquiring
would,
minds want to know.
Yeah.
I thought I'd be a wise ass and go look at the NIST known exploited vulnerabilities catalog to see if it showed up in there. And I'm like, there'll be nothing that old. The first thing at the top of the list right now is two 2019 vulnerabilities, but they're for Sitecore CMS, not this one. And then there's like the fifth one is a 2017 vulnerability. It's like, holy crap.
You do find older ones on there because it's based on what's exploited, not what's
Yeah, what's being actively exploited. It's like so much for making my point, though. And I was thinking if you could watch the Kev for something like that, hey, whoops, look at an old one popped in there. We maybe we have another scope creeps.
Yeah,
and
Bill's got a story about cvemap. It's interesting. I have used a lot of open source and free tools that analyze the CVE data sources, right? Various data. So you've got the official CVE one, and then you got the NVD enrichment, and then there's other sources. Then you can link into exploit databases that list the CVE and correlate that data stored in a database. There's been a whole series of projects. A lot of them don't work anymore because those back-end feeds have changed their API. I had one that worked really good, and when I looked at the Python code, it was scraping OpenCVE.io. And OpenCVE.io changed the format in their HTML and JavaScript, right? So the format of the data changed, which broke that. And I never went back and fixed it. I really should actually go back and try.
What the hell, dude? I mean, come on.
Right? I used it. Well, then I just stopped using it. And so I'm wondering, I'm sure, or it's likely that companies like VulnCheck and others, whose part of their mission is to sift through this data to provide good analytics to companies, would, because you can, in some of the tools, I was able to query the database and sort it by the most recent CVEs that have been updated, not published, but updated. So I'd get older CVEs. And I'm like, that's weird. Why is that showing up now? Oh, because it's when it's updated. So you can sort the data by updated date that is published, but I wonder how much that trickles down. So I'm wondering if Triplite, people that have Triplite, are you aware that this happened, Triplite customers?
And this is a great one that I struggle with too, is that, great, you have this Triplite UPS and there's a new or an updated vulnerability and you really need to patch because maybe it's on the Kev or it's being exploited by threat actors. How does Triplite on a device that no longer as part of their older fleet from 2019 or earlier, 6-year-old stuff that wasn't using firmware updates by default, automatic updates by default, that the user actually had to go and do an update. How does a company like Triplite reach out to their customers to say you need to update this shit?
Right.
Like,
Or do they even have an update? To Jeff's point, like I didn't dig into this deep enough to figure out did the original devices that were vulnerable had a firmware version and maybe that was fixed. But in the past 6 years, did they also fix this vulnerability in newer versions of the firmware? And now we're just realizing it exists in older versions of the firmware.
Yep.
Or does it exist in the latest version of the firmware for the newly discovered products that are vulnerable to this?
So,
I don't have the answer to that.
why?
So if let's say it was fixed, still, how does Triplite go and tell these people that they've got this 2-year-old vulnerability on their this thing that has been patched, and they're actively being compromised and doing bad things, but they just need to update and be simple.
If there was only
no way to reach
there was
out.
only a company that had a whole bunch of firmware in a database and can tell you if it's updated or not,
That's totally never going to be a thing.
any such
I don't
company
know,
that has such
I don't
functionality.
I don't know any. Wait, I don't know any company that might have any of that type of stuff either. But the problem becomes is how do you tell your customers that you got to update your shit? You have no idea who to contact, right? And collecting the data of who to contact might violate certain laws in certain countries.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
So, a vulnerability is discovered 6 years ago. Who's responsible for researching that vulnerability in other things?
Right.
Typically, the vendor should,
Sure.
right? The vendor should.
Yes.
It doesn't always happen.
But there's nothing that compels them to do that?
Nothing that compels them. From a technical perspective, it's interesting to think about, like Intezor used to do this with malware, right? They would collect a whole bunch of malware samples, and then they would, I don't know if they disassembled, decompiled, or both, right? But they pulled, let's just say, blanket term, pulled apart the malware and stored the results of the pulling apart of the malware. Then they had an engine that would compare it, and they would go, this malware is very closely related to this malware. So like if you have that malware on your system and it's been documented like how to recover from this other malware, likely the recovery and detection is pretty similar. What the technology I'm excited about is discovering this in software and firmware. So we discover a vulnerability. If you can decompile software and then run some kind of analysis against it and go, well, you guess what? That firmware binary or that binary, when decompiled, has this vulnerability. And I looked through the source code of all the other decompiled binaries that I have and found that this other component, basically same vulnerability, right? That's exciting.
Yeah. And it's, I was trying to figure out, had the vendor said anything? And I mean, if you dig in through the article from, the checklist.org one you posted, there is a reference to their site that basically says from Triplite saying, they say it's fixed in this version and it just takes you to their firmware download site. It's like, there's nothing. It's like it's so old Triplite isn't saying anything because it's the same mitigation.
Right.
And it looks like the firmware is from 2021 type time frame, the updated firmware. But I could be off on that. But it looks like it's
Now
this. You had to work hard. You had to work for it.
I'm gonna analyze some Triplite firmware coming up.
Hey,
if only there were platforms that could automatically analyze firmware.
Huh.
boy.
I mean, right.
You're not wearing the shirt.
Not wearing
Yeah.
the right shirt. Yeah.
There's open source ones too. I talked about Emba in a webinar.
Yep.
I know I did so many webinars recently, but Emba's great.
I talked to Jeff about Emba today, didn't I?
You did.
Nice.
I did.
Speaking of which, I was going to ask a question, and you sort of gave me the opening, Larry. Would an SBOM have helped in this situation to discover this particular vulnerability sooner in more things?
Unlikely.
Yeah, because I think that the vulnerability is in the web code itself, not in a dependency package.
Let me clarify. It could have, if your SBOM included all of the file components from your firmware, and if the file component had a signature or like a hash,
CPE or something too,
or a hash, which then you could match to other hashes for other SBOMs that had file components listed as opposed to just libraries. So yes,
if it's the same exact file, that works. But oftentimes,
there's subtle differences. Like if the model number is not included via variable and it's statically coded into the page or something of the like, then that would not have.
Right.
So Jeff, I think the answer is it could have helped if those SBOMs are generated appropriately and are tracked appropriately.
Which is an interesting question. Well, I'm not done with my tangent, Paul, if I may. Don't cut me off.
Wow.
Where's Larry?
Get off my lawn, buddy.
I'm such a dick. I just like cutting people off.
In 5 days, I, as a QSA, working with companies that have to do PCI, am going to have to start evaluating SBOMs because there's a new requirement that becomes effective next week that requires an inventory of all bespoke and custom software as well as system components. So they don't say it, but it's effectively an SBOM. And I got my first SBOM today from a client, and I'm looking at it. And I'm like, holy shit, how do you make sense of this? Because they ran out of space in their spreadsheet. They only got halfway through the list of items on their inventory. And they're like, yeah, that's only a part of it. And it was all, it was 10,000 lines. And I'm like, okay, there's got to be more to this. So I reached out to Mr. Godfather of the SBOM, Alan Friedman. He's like, oh yeah, there's all sorts of freeware tools that are out there that can, he used the term consume all of this data, because the requirement in PCI is have the inventory and make sure that they're using it to identify vulnerabilities, because that's the whole point of having an SBOM in the first place. Right. So I'm taking this crash course on not whether a client's doing it, but how do I tell that a client's doing it and doing it effectively?
Yeah, what the hell are they doing with the data?
Yeah, what the hell are they doing with the data?
I'm storing.
You may proceed.
I have lots
Paul.
of SBOMs.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And it's not.
Yeah. So,
like, we covered that story, so I'm trying to use our new software to mark it as covered, but yeah, it's not working. Wait. Yeah.
I remember I ran into that page in
I
PP Works. Cool. That'd be interesting to see how that works.
Paul's Security Weekly is supported by Bitwarden, the trusted solution for password, passkey, and secrets management. Bitwarden empowers everyone to create and manage strong and unique credentials across all accounts and devices. With enterprise SSO integration, end-to-end encryption, and secure autofill capabilities, Bitwarden defends against phishing attacks and data breaches. Strengthen your security posture with tools built to protect what matters most. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Bitwarden.
So, anybody want to talk about Signal?
Yeah, we can do Signal.
Let's do Signal.
Sure. What about it, Lee?
So I heard there were a couple of guys having a sensitive conversation, and they added the press.
But Signal's really good for that, Lee, because it's encrypted, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was thinking, okay, ignoring the topic, I'm thinking the advice, with Salt Typhoon getting into all the telecom systems, one of the advices is to use Signal, WhatsApp, or whether you're not sending it in the clear or in an acceptable form across the telecom channels, right? Remember that. And so these guys are actually seem to be following that. And they've got a record of the chat, it looks like, which, because it's Signal, that's, if it's an official government folks, the government National Archive says you have to have this information and submit it eventually to the archive. So they're following that. But don't you remember when we all started telecommuting all the time, and it's like, who's the unrecognized person in the meeting? We're supposed to check it out.
Yeah. So there's three things for me. Let's see if I can remember all three. One is there's a process failure in adding people to the chat, which also begs the question is if that information becomes
also
public,
could be called an operational procedure, or
yes,
OPSEC,
it's an operational.
For sure.
It's an OPSEC failure of adding someone to a chat. The second thing is, though, shouldn't you have classifications of data, and some data should be classified not to be put in something like a signal.
The data they had was all operationally sensitive. It was not classified.
Okay.
I mean, I've read a transcript of the chat. It was sensitive, unclassified data.
Okay, so it did come under some kind of data classification.
Yeah.
The other thing is, has no one heard of disappearing messages in Signal?
Well, so that becomes even in this particular case of the story that we're tongue in cheek talking about. That becomes even more of a problem, right?
Right. Well,
because all of those types of communications are supposed to be recorded as part of record of all that type of stuff, and then if you do disappearing,
it's not recorded.
No.
Well,
I mean, but they were recorded and published published for the whole world. So there you go. They totally satisfied that requirement.
Yeah.
This time, Sam.
This time.
Yeah.
So
so they just need to always put a reporter in the chat to fulfill that requirement.
Yeah. Pretty much when it comes to something like Vance, essentially everything they do is considered a record.
Right.
So you can't use the disappearing message would have been really smart, Paul. Yeah, that's yeah. But
Bill's
it would have gotten in trouble.
Disappearing messages.
Yeah, big fan. I have a little bit different take on this. So I also have this story in my list. So this I have number 3. This is the greatest national security breach in American history, right? So I feel like So Lee, I see you, but there is a link to there's a YouTube channel that I posted, and this was an ex-NSA guy who was a collection specialist who goes through and talks about how he would target, if he was the NSA and he was targeting certain individuals, how would we go about it? And this is a very, very clear security breach, right? So I think that this, first of all, I think that this is treasonous. I feel like this put soldiers at risk. I feel like this put
treason by the reporter or treason by the people in the Signal chat, or both?
Absolutely
What's
not
his
the
face
reporter.
who added the report?
Absolutely not the reporter. So anyone who was complicit in that chat, who joined that chat, as part of that chat, to me, committed treason. We have process. We have procedure. We have communications systems that are purpose built for this equipment. And now we have officials that are just completely flushing all that down the toilet and saying, "Hey, let's just use Signal. It's easier. I don't have to go into the SCIF."
I agree that part of it makes it like the greatest national security breach in terms of OPSEC failure. I disagree with the greatest national security breach because I think WikiLeaks and Snowden leaks definitely fill out maybe there's a top 3 to 5 that I think comes before this one in terms of
there's some and I think I get
to your point, Bill, in terms of like OPSEC failure.
This
is pretty high on the list of
50s, 40s, 50s that might have given up nuclear secrets. That
exactly. Kind of the FBI. Who was the FBI guy they made a movie about?
You guys are reading way too much into it. So it's not the information that was released. It is the people and the process that
the OPSEC failure.
Right. Like they have zero care for what they were doing. Zero.
Yeah.
So not only were they using,
it's fair to say they have zero fucks. Let's just cut to the chase.
Zero fucks.
Right.
But first of all, so let's not even let's say that a journalist wasn't added to the chat. Okay. Let's say that a journalist was not added. Still a huge OPSEC failure. Right. Still.
Because if Signal ends up with a back door, then
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's a back door or not. It doesn't matter at all. It does So what is the most insecure device sitting in anybody's reach right now?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It speaks to the catastrophic OPSEC failure, Bill. I agree with you there.
I've got a BlackBerry around here somewhere.
And done brazenly.
Right.
Yep.
So
go ahead, Lee, and then I want
because one of the things, there's a misconception that if this had been actually an NSI, National Security Information Level conversation, because this was NSI, not restricted data, so it's the less sensitive data, it still doesn't have to happen in a SCIF. It has to be in an area approved for classified processing. That does not mean a SCIF.
So
Correct.
I understand that and agree with you, Lee. But so I have not seen. So one, I will admit that I have not seen how that data was classified right yet.
Right,
So
and right now they're saying it is not classified.
Well,
They're not talking about how they didn't go give the unclassified sensitivity rating on it, which they should have.
Yeah.
But it was definitely not secret because they weren't giving enough specificity. It was damn close. And fortunately, it's NSI because NSI expires. Restricted data has no expiration date. It's like the design for a nuclear weapon never is unclassified because it will always work.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yep.
I'm going to try real hard not to get political on this, but I also think
Go for it.
I think the person that is classifying the data is also the person who was responsible for the data disclosure. So that's a little
Absolutely.
bit right. So it's hard for me to justify like how this data was classified. That being said, I'm going to pull back a little bit, and I do want to talk about what does this say about Signal. I'm just curious. Like so. First of all,
it has the perception that is incredibly secure.
That's right.
And Bill, the one thing I want to jump in right after Lee here, and sort of to this point, right as we're hearing about this this issue with the disclosure and all this type of stuff, we're getting some rumors that Signal has been installed on desktop in many government agencies for use for non-classified type of secured communications.
Yep.
And if you think about the irony on that is that you can pair a phone to a desktop device.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are learning that
copy
there
the
are
history.
specific...
I'd argue you have to. Right?
No, you don't
Signal
have-
makes you.
No.
You can. It has to be tied to a number.
A phone number, yeah, but
right.
you do
Signal
not have to
desktop.
tie Signal desktop has to be tied. You have a linked desktop to a
phone. You have to have a number,
right,
in a phone.
The point being here is you have a desktop, which is allegedly what was a here in those government agencies, Signal on a desktop tied to a phone. And we're hearing, and I saw some stuff that specific government agencies are being warned that threat actors are targeting Signal on the desktop.
Yeah.
So if you're
Because
targeting
any app is only secure as secure as the operating
right,
system.
and if
it's
you're
installed on.
if they're targeting Signal on the desktop, which means they have all
At
the messages
best,
that were sent from desktop and the phone.
Gee, what could go wrong, Larry?
Yeah,
I know.
So,
Nothing.
but I do want to pull back, and so just imagine that. So one thing, so I want everybody to kind of read between the lines here a little bit, right? So if we have the vice president and we have whoever else those people were,
Really important people.
really important people, if they trust Signal, so should you. Like quite honestly, I don't want to be the one to say that, but Signal is, to my understanding, there is no flaw to Signal, right? When now we get shown that our that our very important people are using it. Now, Signal Desktop certainly has some issues. I think everybody's aware that once Signal Desktop comes into the fold, a lot of things change, right? So the security aspect of Signal change. But I do want to make sure that I mention they were using Signal. They were not using WhatsApp. They were not using
Telegram
or whatever, right? Like let's read between the lines here a little bit.
Mm-hmm. No,
Signal's great.
No, yeah, well, you need to know the tools you are using and what their limitations are.
Well, it's great, and we're not talking about the cryptography and the algorithm. When I started a million years ago, it was called ComSec. We were encrypting stuff in flight on radio waves, generally Morse code or often Morse code. But the weak points then and the weak points now are the endpoints.
Yep.
And the implementation and the exploitation of the encryption algorithm. So nothing wrong with the encryption algorithm itself in many of these products. It's the how they're used, how they're deployed, how they're implemented, if there's key distribution and key management issues, which there should be. Those are all factors. But we don't think about that. We just think, oh, this is very convenient and easy to use, so let's just use it.
I mean, I'm sorry. I just get really pissed off about this scenario because, like, I really truly feel like this is a scenario where the security community should be asking for blood. Like we should be screaming at the top of our lungs saying, hey, we have laws in place for how we handle this data. We have process in place.
I'm on a mailing list of former NSA employees. They're screaming for blood.
Right.
Yeah, trust me.
And the reason why we're not and the reason why this group isn't is because we're all too worried about how people are going to see us politically. I don't care. I don't care. Left, right, center, whatever. I don't care. But this is a clear, like it. When I think about how this is for me, is I feel like I would be in. I've been in this. Jeff, you've been in this position. I've been in this position. I would be. We'd
be in jail,
right? I would be in jail, and so it just pisses me off.
They tried to put me in jail.
It pisses me off to no end that it's rules for thee and not for me, right? And that's how I feel about this. I can't believe that
the rules inside the Beltway are different, and that's unfortunate. It's really, I mean, we would do all these secure communication things at the lab to protect stuff. Then we find out in the Beltway they're using their own devices, texting stuff that's super sensitive, and it's like what the hell, or we have people that aren't the information owners saying, no, it's not classified anymore, and that's not their call.
Right.
And if you have enough rank, you get off scot-free. It doesn't matter. It's not even a crime. But if you're somebody like us, you're going to get locked up because it is a crime.
Well, I feel like laws should start with if you are a government official, regardless of your political, like if you're a government official, you should be required to follow the laws by, like, I'm talking about if you cross the street and you go outside the little white lines, 10 years in jail for jaywalking. Go. Like, right? Like, I feel like things are flipped. I don't understand. Paul's gonna interrupt me here quick. Like
he's gonna cut you off.
I see that I'm getting the hook. Like, but
do as I say.
The only reason you're still going is because I'm making a drink.
So I'll
the only reason you're drinking is because he's still talking.
Yeah.
So this is true. I need to switch to something stronger than
just
beer.
Real quick, I just want to say shout out to Donnie Clayton for this. Like there's a bunch of inside jokes here, but you get it and we love it. So that was for you.
Yeah, and so Bill, to pull the hook on you a little bit too, a little bit lighten the mood a little bit here. The irony is that what we had in many cases, I saw on something like Hackaday, there was a story about breaking the news about all this Signal crap, and the next story was from Hackaday, how to add someone to a group on Signal.
I saw that in your I was like, that's so funny.
Yeah. And then Paul had a story about what is a SCIF.
Yeah.
No, that was Bill.
Yeah, that
was Bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
Yeah. So I think it's important.
Completely accurate.
If you don't know what a SCIF is, I think it's important for you to go out and read, what it is, what it's for.
But you do have to understand what compartmentalized data is.
That's true. That's true. And so Lee, like I agree with you on that part.
I think we actually are in a lot of violent agreement, Bill.
Yeah,
I really
are. I
may be giving you shit, but we are in agreement.
The irony that somebody pointed out, and I hadn't thought of it initially, but 10 years ago, the issue was a private email server.
Yeah.
And there was similar, albeit falling on political lines, but similar outrage. And similar, smack my head shaking for the people that are on this email list of former NSA employees.
Well, yeah, private email server, and she was not the data owner, yet declared the information was no longer classified.
Yeah, right.
Precedent setting, as it turns out.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, remember when they tried to switch Obama from his BlackBerry to a SMEPED, a secure, And please don't ask me what SMEPED, personal electronic device, but SME, I forget what that stands for, but it was basically
subject matter expert.
Yeah, no, not that one. The SMEPED was like a big ass smartphone that had Sweet B encryption in it and serious crypto keys and stuff. And it was certified for like NSI classified data, secret NSI. And including it came with instructions of the rules for having a classified conversation in your car. But I don't think they lasted like 5 minutes on the battery, and they were wreaking people just moved away from them.
Speaking of
anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, Sam, SpyX or Oracle? Which one you want to cover? Or if there's another story of yours you really want to cover? Because I know you have to drop early.
Oh, I want Sam's number one.
Okay.
Your password reuse.
Sam no longer has
that one's
a
pretty
choice.
simple. That's pretty simple and amazing. I think might be the best. So Cloudflare, a lot of people do what I do. My website ends its HTTPS at Cloudflare and then moves after that with HTTP.
No.
So I guess a lot of people are doing that because Cloudflare can see the passwords of the traffic going through. So they set up a system that hashes it so they're not directly handling the naked password to see what the passwords are. And they found 41% of successful logins are using compromised passwords. So in case
passwords
anybody
that have already
imagined,
been part of a data breach.
right, like I've been, have you been pwned?
Yeah.
So, this is, in case anybody didn't think this was happening, everybody's reusing passwords and continuing to use passwords that are known to be compromised.
41% of Cloudflare users
Yeah.
are reusing passwords, which is a pretty decent sample set in a pretty high percentage, if you ask me.
Right.
So that was
It's a large
my take.
proportion of the internet.
That's a large
Yeah.
portion of the internet, right? And so it makes like I had never seen those numbers, and so when I was scanning through that, I was like, man, Sam, that one's crazy, because when you start thinking about, okay, how big is first of all, how big is 41%? Whoa. And then you were like, and then you start like,
People get elected president for less than that percentage of the vote.
right. Oh my God. And then how big is Cloudflare? Whoa.
They're huge.
Right.
I know it was like 10% of the internet 10 years
What
ago.
percent of
I'm
the
sure it's
internet
more
goes
now.
through? This is an algebra problem.
Right.
What percent of the internet goes through Cloudflare?
Yep. If Cloudflare
A lot.
had 20 million users and they were headed southbound at 40 miles an hour
in a train.
Yeah. And this just to tie into this a little bit to my story number 2, Atlantis AIO credential stuffing across 140 platforms. Like this is a thing. This is still a problem that there are malware services out there that do credential stuffing for you. So reuse of a password, still a problem.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you're, if even if you're not terminating your SSL at Cloudflare, if you've got a link, but they're basically a man in the middle, right? So
They are.
Correct.
That's the risk there.
That's
All
why
right.
the purists
I've
all
got
got
a
mad when they
statistic.
came out. Yeah.
That and this is from 2022, Cloudflare is used by 80.5% of all the websites whose reverse proxy services we're aware of. All right, Paul, there's your algebra problem.
Right.
41% of 80%. What is it?
No, 80% of the ones that use reverse proxies.
Yeah.
But that's not 80% of all the websites.
Details. But just so we have
They're in the
numbers to
cash
work
business.
with, I want Paul to do math.
When I
me
help my
too.
kids with their math homework, I take a picture of it and then I upload it to ChatGPT and I have it solve the problem, which actually works surprisingly well.
He'll upload the podcast to ChatGPT and give us the answer next week.
I'm acing 6th grade math. It's awesome.
You might be smarter than the
He's-
6th grader.
He's the tallest 6th grader in the class.
That's right.
So Larry,
Billy
what
Madison.
is your Atlantis AIO? Is it a tool for cred stuffing?
Well, so it's a tool for doing credential stuffing, but it's one of those like malware, crimeware as a service type groups.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the quote, cyber criminals out there are leveraging software as a service to do these tasks for them, and Atlantis AIO is one of those services that.
And this service has like a website. Hold on, I think I can cut to that. Can I cut to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Atlantis IO has like a website. That's the screenshot looks like from their website. The advertise it looks like a product. Like your cybersecurity
And
product
there- and there
website,
it
they've
is
got
right-
one.
There it is right now. Atlantis AIO Multi-Checker is a cyber criminal tool designed to automate credential stuffing attacks. Capable of testing stolen credentials at scale, it can quickly attempt millions of username and password combinations across more than 140 platforms.
So if you scroll down a little bit more on that site, it looks like a link to, or it looks like there's a screenshot from Hacked Forums, and
Keep going, Paul.
yeah, a little bit more.
Keep going.
And I saw a Reddit post the other day,
Keep going.
and it said,
Keep going.
"Is
Keep
Hacked
going.
Forums
There you go.
there you go, right there. Is Hacked Forums a honeypot?" And I think that the overall answer was,
If you have to ask,
"Yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe it might be. I don't know. Weird."
Weird.
Whoa.
I saw a new term related to honeypots the other day. I forget who said it, but it was tar pit.
yeah,
That's a new
different thing.
Well, it was new to me
Yeah.
I thought
in
not
terms
Tom
of
Liston's
setting up
tool?
some
Yeah.
sort of site that
Well, it's the La
people
Brea
get
tar pit, but
stuck
yeah.
in.
I mean, it's you
Yep.
know terminology.
Yep, the La Brea, Jeff. I don't know if you've ever heard of the La Brea tar pit. That would be it's a
Tom
honeypot.
Liston.
It's a honeypot that sucks them in and they get stuck. So
And
that-
there was someone did like a iteration of that a few months ago. We covered it on the show.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
and there was
You can
and there
do
was
group
now-
chat on Signal.
And there was a there was one that I saw. I think it was yesterday about someone, and I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Cloudflare using AI to create never-ending tar pits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
Maybe that's what.
where's
it was.
Tom Liston when you need him?
I know, right?
That was,
Doing net menaces.
By the way, Cloudflare at 81% is 19.3% of all websites. 81% of the ones using reverse proxy. So what's 41% of 81% and 19.3%? Go.
No.
No. Stop trying to make us do math, Jeff. Well, we don't need math to talk about the Oracle breach, which apparently was real, but Oracle claims that there is
Not
no
real.
breach. There was no breach of Oracle Cloud, is what Oracle's PR team said. But the breach forms tell a different story, Sam. It's just
well,
Do they?
hilarious. Sam's unmuting himself.
Details.
Yeah, you're talking about the leak.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the spyware. And the main point of this is that these spyware companies are just notoriously insecure. So you're talking about SpyX, right? They lost.
No, I was talking about
million.
Oracle. Your story number 6.
Oh, okay.
Validating the breach.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think somebody else had this and maybe more up-to-date data. I mean, a hacker claims to have hacked Oracle, and they prove it. They gave 10,000 records to somebody to verify, and they showed a file they uploaded to the server that says hacked by my handle. And Oracle said, no, we didn't get hacked. It's all fake. That doesn't sound very fake. The last I heard, Oracle is still denying it. And I remember this happens a lot, right? The company will deny it for maybe 2 weeks until they can't lie about it anymore. Then they'll finally have to admit they've been hacked.
Yeah, I don't get that. It just makes them look bad.
Well,
Yes,
There's no classified information discussed.
Well, quite honestly, like what you want to do is you want to weather that initial storm, right? Like nobody cares about the follow-up article, you know.
I see. It's a PR strategy, Bill.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep. The
Let's not let them get away with it, okay?
Yeah. What's the other one? Don't ever don't necessarily assume it's malice when incompetence will do type of thing.
Yeah.
Here. Like they may not be intentionally saying that. No, we're not hacked to be to be contrarian.
We have
Just
sing
might
no
not have figured
evidence.
it out yet.
We have not detected any evidence that we have impacted.
We have not seen any evidence.
well,
Hello.
Yeah.
Who's that there?
Yeah.
Hello. Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe we should open my
You
eyes.
know-
Right?
it was
You know,
only
that's what
6
Trump
million
said.
records.
That's what Trump said when they asked him about the Signal. He said, I don't know. Nobody told me anything. I don't know that happened.
Well, I believe that.
Yeah, that's politicians' standard response.
Yeah.
Deploying enterprise AI, tools like Copilot from Microsoft 365 and Glean are prone to oversharing and data leakage. They lack the in-depth access controls required to ensure that query responses align with users' need to know boundaries. Without proper access controls, these tools accelerate the discovery of improperly secured sensitive files within the organization's M365 environment. Gnostic enables enterprises to safely adopt AI through setting need-to-know based access controls. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Gnostic and see how Gnostic can help stop AI oversharing. The SpyX is interesting.
Yeah.
So there's stalkerware that Apple allows in its App Store, right? Because I remember years ago covering a story like if spouses want to spy on each other, there's totally like apps to do that.
Interesting.
And I'm like, that's shit. But I'm like, how do these end up in like being validated in the App Store? Apple obviously having a much more of a walled garden approach to what apps can be in there. Google does provide protection for that, but I feel like it's not as good as Apple's. But these apps still end up in here that allow people to spy on each other. And that's what SpyX was. They called it stalkerware.
Or spouseware.
Yeah. And, these are sold for parents to monitor their kids and for bosses to monitor their employees. Mm-hmm. And, there's the whole mobile device management frameworks. So there are a bunch of things that put your device under remote control. I've also seen them where they advertise it saying you can tell where your teenager is and you can tell how fast they're driving their car and everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
those what you can't, but no,
that would be
what I learned is
Life 360.
Yeah.
You can't, but you can't get the text messages
some of
on
you can.
Apple. On Apple, I think on Android you could, but on Apple you cannot look at least text messages. I'm not sure about messages in other.
That's another
apps.
reason why you should use Signal, everybody.
I agree.
With disappearing messages.
Yep.
With disappearing messages.
Yep.
If I were to advise the youth of today, I would tell them all to use Signal and set disappearing messages.
5 minutes.
But I don't.
5 minutes disappearing.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Right. Because the parents will tell their kids, don't send stupid messages to Johnny, because we know Johnny's parents read their messages. And I know like my kids, like, here's a fun fact, can be highly inappropriate. Imagine that. Right?
Wonder where they get it. Maybe from mom.
I wonder where they get it from. I don't know where they get it from.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but yeah, so the stalkerware is, I don't know. It's interesting. But
is there a
list?
Is there a list of stalkerware for iOS? I mean, like, so when it says like,
if you dug deep enough in the rabbit hole of the internet, you can totally find apps and articles that tell you how to use them in the whole thing.
I'd like,
right?
I mean, so is it something I've never used any of these apps, but like, I think I've shared in our group chat, like what I'm currently working on. But so like, how does it just show up as an application that's normally installed?
No, some of them are invisible and hide, Yeah.
Some of them create a VPN connection back to and funnel all the traffic. I was using an app called Q Studio when my kids were younger to monitor, and not so much monitor. I mean, there was a monitoring aspect because I don't want them to fall victim to like some stalker on the internet. Now I've educated my kids, but as a backup, I'm like, I want someone to do that. But it was also more for controlling, and it was before Apple released a bunch of the newer features, right? I could say how long they could use the device, how long they could use an app for, and things like that. Apple has subsequently built that into their platform. Likely one of the driving factors behind Apple doing that is to get rid of, is kick them out of the ecosystem and make them not as popular. I would rather see people use Apple's facilities, quite frankly, because from a privacy standpoint, Apple's pretty good, as we know. And some
how do we know that, Paul?
Good.
Well,
I think it's just track record, Jeff.
And I think we can say that
but
they're going to be better than some chintzy app that was, that's made to spy on your wife, right? Like,
yeah.
And the track record of those apps is horrible. That was what struck me as the most important thing here. This is the 25th spyware company that got hacked and lost all their data.
So SpyX is one of these companies. They got hacked and they breached the information. Yeah, they leaked the information.
Yes, I mean, in addition to people using it to spy on people, they're idiots and they just lose the data. It's pretty rude.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they don't.
I'm not saying Apple wouldn't lose the data. Like, there is that possibility, but it's much less.
I mean, when you're running a spyware company, you don't care. Like,
no,
I don't care. Right?
Evidently not.
My experience with Apple, which is probably 10 years ago at this point, sort of in the beginning stages of mobile apps, we had a client that had an app that we were trying to evaluate, and they were putting it out on the Apple Store, and I was like, how do we know it's secure? And has anybody independently tested it or looked for anything? And Apple basically said, trust us, we're Apple. And I'm like, fuck you. I don't care who you are.
Wait, can we say fuck you on this thing?
We can.
We just did.
Yeah, we can. We just did.
I prefer not to have every other word a curse word, but you can certainly curse.
Every third word is fine.
Like PG-13.
This is not South Park.
Rule.
Got it.
PG-13.
But a well-placed, expletive is appropriate.
Yeah, well placed. I do want to transition to
Before we
the remote
transition, Paul, if I may.
now you just interrupted me. See, I get labeled a dick, but when other people interrupt me, you don't get labeled a dick.
That's because I do it so pleasantly with a smile on my face.
And it's fun to do to Paul, right? And it's fun to do to Paul.
Well, there's that.
Yeah.
But we kind of plowed through the Oracle thing. My article, which Sam said might have more detail. I don't know if it does or not, but it actually had vulnerability analysis in it. And it talked, I wanted to sort of tie this back to our first story because it has
number
a CVE.
was it, Jeff?
My story number
5.
The CVV that was exploited was from 2021, but then they go on to say that
CVE.
the CVE, sorry, the vulnerable endpoint had not been apparently patched since September 27th, 2014.
Whoa.
That kind of raises the shackles of, somebody should be 10 years in jail, much like Bill was feeling about certain other violations.
And to add to that quote, Jeff, allowed an unauthenticated attacker network access via HTTP.
Oof.
But that was the source of the breach, was a system that was last updated in 2014
over HTTP, so
Over
none of their network
HTTP.
monitoring even caught it. Wow. Like they were getting hacked over an insecure channel and they couldn't even see it.
Wait,
because it was
over
it
what
was so
channel?
insecure they couldn't see it.
What was it? Over what?
That'd be port 80.
Over HTTP.
Oh, HTTP.
If it was over HTTPS, like maybe you give them a pass because like none of their network monitoring tools were doing.
Wait, I thought network monitoring.
It was HTTP, but it was on a non-standard port, so therefore they missed it.
Okay. Because I was going to say, like, network
So it was on
monitoring
8080.
stuff, that's like,
Because who would think to look for
And
HTTP
and it's
on
in Oracle
8080?
software. They're not even patching their Oracle software. That's really
Wait,
embarrassing.
so Oracle's not patching their Oracle software?
dude, it's hard.
Yes.
It's hard.
Well,
It's
they were
hard.
waiting for the next roll up with 3,000.
It was a phone.
Now aren't you glad I
I
cut
see
you
where
off,
this
Paul?
is going now. I was going to go in this direction, and Larry just took us there. And it's it's well deserved.
Remember how many moons we railed on Oracle because they did once a quarter patches with like 30 billion patches. In
I think they still do.
thing. They do.
Yeah, they do. They do still do CPUs, and they have like a gazillion updates in them.
Yep.
But
And apparently the system only gets an update every 13 years because, well,
But I think this is a
due
a philosophy and a fundamental notion that you have to be on board with, right? And I think it just comes down to like your perspective as to how often you want patches, right? I think Adrian was pointing this out in our group chat, and I don't fault anyone for
I love
this.
how we've said group chat like 1,000 times in this. Like,
Yes, this is a group chat show.
group chat.
but there's certain appetite for that, right? Like,
Don't Larry, don't interrupt me.
so on a Windows system, like once a month is totally okay. But if you've got a mission critical system running Oracle, like every 3 months, that might even be pushing it. Clearly, this one we're still waiting for the update window.
That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of factors that go into how well or not well I take to how often updates are released. Like Adrian's point was every 6 months.
Was that in the group chat?
It was in the group chat.
Sorry.
Every 6 months, Fedora makes a major update, right? But I think for the majority of Fedora users, that's probably what they figured out their user base likes. And Adrian doesn't like that. I don't fault Adrian for that at all. I like a rolling release where I get updates more often. Maybe not on the bleeding edge. I like to be backed off from the bleeding edge. Other people like the Ubuntu. I'm going to stay on this version for a long time. It's long-term support. It's got 6 years of support. Some people like the Slackware Red Hat. Microsoft has their strategy. Apple has their strategy, right? And it's all about trying to appeal to your user bases to basically, I think it's how do I get my users not to hate me? And that's how often we're going to release patches. It doesn't really tie back to what's the appropriate security model. It's how can I piss off the least amount of my user base as possible.
Well,
But
I don't even think
it-
this one is. Yeah, this one I think is not even about patching schedule. This is about how often do you audit your environment for neglected systems? Because obviously this is something they forgot about 10 years ago. Nobody planned to leave this sitting there for 10 years.
No,
Listen, before we give them too much credit for this system that nobody looked at, this system was login.us2.oraclecloud.com, right? Like, I mean,
So it was critical.
But that is presumably some
Mission
legacy system
Maybe.
that
Maybe.
was probably just left going with the intention of turning it off later
Well,
as they moved to HTTPS,
what's
and
funny
nobody turned it off.
Yeah, what's funny about that, Sam, is I think every incident I've ever worked was like, well, we were getting ready to turn that system off in 2 weeks, right? Like,
Of course.
Right, but Bill, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I also, I don't want to give Oracle a pass on this, but I do want to point out that your attack surface monitoring and management
For sure.
gets exponentially more difficult the more systems that you have.
Oh my gosh, for sure.
And you think about how large Oracle is. Again, I don't give them a pass, but
Pop quiz.
also they got a lot of systems out there
Yeah.
to manage. If you got a smaller environment, you got a much less of an attack surface to defend.
It's hard. It's so hard. There's so many systems.
What
Pop
percentage?
quiz.
we make so
a
much
system
money.
that hasn't been patched since 2014.
You
What
don't get a
operating
pass.
system?
You don't
is
get a
it
pass.
running?
No pass. What percentage
this
of
is why
Oracle
we need-
systems are running on the internet? Or is the
Well,
internet?
this is why we need compliance standards to force people to actually like bring things up to some minimum level.
Yeah, but this system didn't process credit card transactions, so it was out of scope.
Nobody cares.
We won't even talk about SOC 2 in this whole thing. That's a different
I'm
story.
pretty sure the login node for your ERP system is not entirely out of scope.
Yeah. I can't believe we've talked about a breach that didn't happen for 30 minutes.
No, we didn't talk about it.
No.
Sam,
We should probably take it to our Signal group.
Sam, my story number
Maybe we
three.
need group chat.
I just want to transition to my story number 3 very quickly.
But wait, Paul.
Find-
No, I'm just kidding.
Finding
Go ahead.
bugs in implementations of HQC, the 5th post-quantum standard. This was research from...
You just said a whole lot of words I don't
I
understand.
don't understand the title.
They're
Did you
actually
try to- I don't know if you
letters.
tried
They
to
weren't
read
even
the
words.
article.
Nope.
Like, holy crap. This is from our friends at Quarks Labs, who I love. Our friend Yvonne Arce works there. And I've known him for a long time. He's awesome. And his team does great work. And it's amazing, like, the breadth and scope of what they work on. They'll work on UEFI vulnerabilities. They'll work on web vulnerabilities. They'll work on post-quantum stuff. I love the work that
Hell, we haven't even
happening.
gotten to quantum yet, and we're on post quantum now. Jesus
I mean,
How does that work?
So-
That's right.
so in the post, it loses me very quick because they give even the high level explanation on how HQC works. Like I was intimidated by this, and I didn't attempt to digest it. What I did pull from the article is that before this algorithm is approved, like folks like Quarks Labs are looking to find vulnerabilities and flaws in it and publish those before it makes it out into the real world, which I appreciate. I think the best chance we have at making every piece of technology we use more resilient is finding the bugs before they reach the real world. And there was a CVE issued for this and everything. Sam, I don't know if you saw this. I know you're kind of one of our resident like post or quantum experts, but I don't know if you had a chance to read this one.
Yeah, I read it, and it's very interesting, but I can tell you the quantum has nothing to do with it.
No.
What happened is it's not any failure in the quantum algorithm, and it doesn't have anything to do with how it works. It's what happened is the reference software that they give you, the example code, which, as you know, almost everybody just copies and pastes the example code to make their implementation, had 2 bugs in it that undid each other. So when they tried, there's 2 parts to this. It's supposed to be a signature algorithm. So it verifies that the right person has signed it. And when it tries to verify it, it deduces the public key incorrectly, which would mean nothing would ever get verified. But then they have basically like the go-to fail. It always says, yes, it's verified.
Oh,
Return
So
true.
the 2 bugs cancel each other out, and error for anything will always be verified, which it seems like they need better test cases. The test case should involve sending a valid one. Anyway, I don't know why it would pass the tests.
and
But
also
anyway,
they need to not use go-tos. I was taught that early on in programming that go-tos are bad.
well, yeah, I don't really know if they used GoTo, but it amounts to that. You know, they had
Yeah,
another
I
bug that
gotcha.
causes it. So it's But anyway, it's great that they caught it, because if they hadn't, I'm sure a bunch of people would copy and paste the reference code, and there'd be a generation of devices all doing it wrong.
I talked about the reference code bugs in my webinar that I gave today on hardware hacking. It's the newer ESP32 by NCEC Group that I think we covered last week, right? And it was a bug in the, I don't know if it's reference code, but like in their GitHub, there's an examples folder, and there's example code for interfacing with like Bluetooth. And that code had a handful of vulnerabilities. Like there were 3 criticals and a bunch of other ones. And like my whole thing I presented today was Espressive fixed the reference code, right? They didn't issue CVEs for the vulnerability, likely because it was in reference code, which is software, but not really software. But how many people, to your point, Sam, copied that reference code and it's in their software? Now there's no CVE to track it, but now there's also no great way to go, I still have this vulnerability.
Maybe it intended to be more like a watermark? Like, oh, we're going to know the people that use our code.
Back to, you have to decompile things and look at the source code to analyze it for vulnerabilities. And that's kind of, because I could have changed some stuff around the vulnerability, but like that, where that vulnerability lives in the code, I left that. Maybe that's a super, and I do this all the time. If I copy code, I'm like, wow, that one particular routine or function in this code is like super complicated. I'm leaving that alone. I'm going to change stuff around that. So signature-wise, it's not going to match anything, but like I still have the vulnerable code. And it's usually in that block of code that's like, you ever see the comment like, I don't really know what this code does, but don't change it? That happens all the time.
Yeah. Remember a couple of weeks ago, it turned out that a bunch of people use reference code for firmware encryption, including the example key, and don't even change the key.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. It happened. I think the recent example was Intel Boot Guard, like another example of people doing that. And that does happen. Fortunately, like finding keys and test keys is easier than finding vulnerabilities in binaries or source code, right? So we have that working for us. Like the detection of it, I think, is much easier.
Right. So I think scanning tools are now looking for known or default or prototype keys and that sort of thing, which is helpful. But I remember when I was first starting out, where you had a whole bunch of linked pieces of software and they came with preset passwords. You had the option to change them, but if you wanted the thing to work in your lifetime, you left them alone because you didn't know what would break. I mean, we've moved past that, but I mean, I'm talking 1980s, 90s, but I think that mindset's still there. It's still.
I don't think we've moved past it that much. I see a lot of vulnerabilities of hard-coded default passwords in products over and over.
Remember when you forgot the password to your router, so you looked up the default password online?
No.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, right? And like, it's still 20 years of covering vulnerabilities. Still, one of my favorite vulnerabilities is Joel's backdoor in D-Link routers, which if you set your
user agent string.
I think it was Joel's backdoor spelled backwards.
It was,
if I remember correctly. It would just authenticate, like with no authentication, you could access everything in the web interface. That was my favorite bug of all time. Because like, who is Joel?
You remember the story because he was one of the developers that was targeted.
That's what we would trace it back to Taiwan and like the web server.
He was the one that was required to do all the troubleshooting and the development on the web interface. So we got sick and tired of having to log into this goddamn thing every 30 minutes. So we just put a backdoor in so we could just use his automated tools.
Because he needs to automate it in the back end. So rather than I need to somehow bypass authentication, but turns out the rest of us can as well. Yeah. But then we've seen a lot of, actually the bug we found that Vlad, my coworker, found, I should say, in Redfish implementations on BMC is kind of similar, right? Manipulation of the header values in your post request bypasses authentication. So I had an AI story for you, Sam and others. My story number 6, Microsoft unveils Microsoft Security Copilot agents and new protections for AI. It's kind of misleading. Like I need to dig into the story a little more. Like the title makes it seem like Microsoft Copilot agents are protecting your AI. But what really is happening... But what really the feature that was in here that kind of piqued my interest, I'm curious, like if or how this works. Microsoft states the phishing triage agent in Microsoft Security Copilot being unveiled today, whenever that story was published this week sometime, can handle routine phishing alerts and cyber attacks, freeing up human defenders to focus on more complex cybersecurity threats, blah, blah, blah. So now I think the jailbreaking of your LLM or AI is important for attackers because it's not just about tricking a public LLM. Mm-hmm. Now I can trick an AI agent into maybe believing my phishing email is legitimate versus not, because now we're integrating AI into our defensive stacks. That was the big takeaway for me. And it's weird. Like, the whole article is kind of weird. It goes in different directions than I anticipated.
Yeah, but this, I think, is what they've been promising us for years. I remember when the Chinese hack occurred of Google in 2010, the companies promised they were going to give us something that would stop the 0 days on the network and not be signature based. And we all laughed, but this is the attempt to do that. They're going to have an AI looking at all your data coming in, your threat intelligence, your device management, your logs and everything, and analyzing that to decide if something looks suspicious. So, if it works, it'd be like a new AI IDS, which everybody seems to be making some version of this.
I mean, on the surface or high level, it sounds great. If I have known bad and I have known good, maybe I can train an AI to distinguish between the two. But again, like, the high level sounds great, but the devil's in the details.
But if you know how badly these things work, then it sounds a lot less great. But anyway.
It often falls down in implementation because variance, humans.
What's that? Did you say, Paul?
Variance on the data. So there's variance on what is bad and what is good, right? Like, if we could have some algorithm that could always, with 100% accuracy, determine, hey, this is bad, that would be
the
great.
evil bit.
But like, the problem is there's a lot of variance on bad, and attackers are crafty, and they can change. Like the RFC on the evil bit, right, is the shining example. Like, if there was an evil bit, we would be great. But we don't really have that.
Mm-hmm. I was with you on the devil's in the implementation.
Yeah.
Speaking of some implementation, Paul, can we go down to your story number 5 and the one that I also had in there that I thought was pretty neat?
Yeah, so I love this story because...
So this story is RTL-SDR with only a browser.
And so what I love about this story is myself and a lot of others that are sitting here in person and virtually, right, have spent hours or days trying to get something working.
Yep.
I've got this hardware, firmware, software, and I'm trying to make it work, and it just won't work. And
like me a couple weeks ago trying to get my microphone to work?
That too. But also, like, I'm trying to get it work. And, like, once I get it working, now I can, like, do the thing I intended to do with it.
So, like, Linux on the desktop.
Sort of. But so what the RTL-SDR in a browser does is kind of help extrapolate away for newer folks that go, I want to see what an SDR can do, software-defined radio, right? I want to see if I tune it to a certain frequency, what do I see? How do I interpret the data? And that's where they want to focus. It takes away that I got this piece of hardware. I got to put firmware on it. I got to put drivers, and I got to get it working. And that can just, like, turn people away.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is start with the easier path, RTL-SDR in the browser, do your thing, but then I'm not absolving you from going back and now making other hardware work with it, because I think that's a valuable experience, and you'll thank me later for going down the hard path of, okay, now I want to get this device, I want to try and get the firmware on it, I want to try and get the drivers working, I want to try and get the software on my own. You should do that.
As a quick intro, like, this is, holy crap, I can do that with a $20 SDR?
Right.
And to me, that is like, it's like the gateway drug.
Yes.
And then you need to go spend some more time Lee's making the real
it's almost like I'm teaching my son how to drive, right? My oldest son. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? Like, use the camera to park.
Yeah.
To get kind of a feel for what it feels like to have that assistant. And then we're going to move to, then you don't have access to the camera. Right. And and this is like a similar thing for me.
That's interesting.
I don't think you should, like, you can't always use the camera or always use the, like, browser STR thing. But if that helps you kind of get your feet wet,
Yep.
Then
Do it.
Now go do it the hard way though.
Yeah.
Like don't.
Right.
I'm not absolving everyone from doing it the hard way, because like I said, you're going to learn lessons that you're going to thank me later. Because like years down the road, you're going to be taking on a project, and you're like, and someone's going to run into an issue, yourself or your coworker, and you're like, wait, I know how to solve that problem because I spent an entire day troubleshooting this thing,
100%.
and all the things I learned in that day I can apply now. And you're like the superhero. You're like, I have superhero powers.
But according to your logic, Paul, shouldn't you teach your son how to back up and park manually without the cameras first, so he gets used to how it feels?
I agree, Jeff. The order might be specific to the individual, right? If the individual is getting super frustrated and kind of like losing the essence of what they're doing, maybe I need to build some confidence and go like, try it this way first. And then once you get that way, now do it the harder way. But you're right, Jeff. Sometimes I might flip flop it. Sometimes I may be like, look, you're gonna do it the hard way first.
And to me, like, Paul, we talked about the easy button, and we get them alerted. And like, to me, the backup cameras in the car are the easy button. Like my new truck has cameras, and do you know how many times I've actually like turned around all the way in the seat to back up?
Yeah,
75% of the time still.
Yeah, you'll get over
I have
that.
a camera for that. All right.
But I only so much. So my Tesla, I can just like click the parking space and it'll automatically park. That I'm like, no, you don't get to like. That's not helping you at all. Right? That's
no.
That's completely useless.
Yeah.
For you.
And so speaking of the easy button, Paul, and you have a Chrome up here. I want to fun little, somewhat related to the clicking the easy button and give you that first little taste for free. Open up a new tab real quick here. And type in Chrome : / Bluetooth -internals.
It'll autocomplete
There you go,
for
right
you.
there. Autocomplete.
Internals.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah. Share this with our audience.
Oh yeah, I can do that. You know what? I can push this button and then I can. Can I make it bigger? I can make it bigger.
Yeah. So
Look at that.
Ghostface Killer.
It's
So-
that's the name of my system. Is Ghostface. They're named after Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
But so this is the browser
it looks like
interacting with my Bluetooth. I didn't even know I had Bluetooth on this. Do I have Bluetooth on this?
Initialize,
system?
present, and power.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently
Look,
you do.
It's enabled too.
Yeah. Now go to devices. Start scan.
Oh boy.
Cool.
Now I'm leaking personal data, personal information. Well, now you see my TV.
Yeah.
That's as much as I'm going to show you on the air.
There's a dong down below.
Go to debug logs.
you probably don't have anything in debug logs.
Debug's not supported.
Yep.
Oh, I love what. So how did we find this?
What do you mean? How did you find that?
So what prompted this? This is pretty cool.
Bluetooth line. We're adding this to 617 wireless class.
I love it.
Yeah, that is.
This is cool.
Like, you need to discover some Bluetooth devices, but you don't have all those fancy Bluetooth tools.
You can use your browser.
You can use Chrome.
Wow.
As long as you've allowed that, you probably have to check that allow it to discover network devices button in Chrome, right?
I didn't have to do anything.
Is
I mean,
it
this
just
is a pretty.
Chrome?
Well,
It is just Chrome.
I'm just going to point.
It might be Chromium based.
I just want to point out
Chrome.
that this system's running Linux and it's running Chrome and it's pretty vanilla install. This system just exists so that Larry, myself, can look at the show notes while we're doing the show and the teleprompter. That's like the only. This system just needs to basically run a web browser.
Yep.
But according to that first adapter page, your machine doesn't floss. I guess we got to call your dentist.
Yeah, it's no flossing.
Wow.
Yeah. What is floss, Larry?
No idea.
Free Libre open source software is what it stands for.
Yep. Let's put it this way. I was talking about this with Paul before the show. Part of the reason why I ordered a new to me Mac is Bluetooth is broken on my Mac for some reason, and I spent 2 days fighting to try to get that to actually work.
See, it's not just Linux users that spend 2 days fighting to get something working. Just saying.
You can, if there's a SANS class, you can take to look at a USB Bluetooth thing for you. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's in the hardware kit.
The problem is I think what happened is that I added a Bluetooth device. I paired a Bluetooth device with this Mac that uses emoji as the name.
Oh,
And I think when it iterates through its paired devices and gets to the emoji, it
I
totally
think
borks.
I
the
think
Bluetooth.
you found either a bug or vulnerability.
I think so, too.
And you need to
Yeah.
disclose
Yeah.
that to Apple.
That's sick. Yeah.
so the question is, how do you find that entry and delete it from the table?
That's the problem. I can't. I have found the entry.
See, in Linux, you could do that.
via some third-party command line tools, and it won't. One, the tool doesn't support the deletion, and two, from the best of my knowledge, it stores the paired devices in Pram.
Oh, but you probably did the Pram reset thing and it didn't do
I
it.
did the reset, and it still shows up.
Oh, interesting.
I can't believe you just released that. Like,
So, but I can't. I
This
can't
is
confirm.
not responsible disclosure.
I am only speculating, Bill, that it is why that happens.
It's coordinated disclosure.
It's
He
okay.
coordinated
It's
with us
okay,
to
Bill. This
disclose
is a
it to
group
the
chat.
world.
Yeah.
right.
Do you guys want funny or silly or something
PCI?
serious?
How about 23andMe?
Yeah, 23.
All right, let's do
and me.
23andMe.
Hell yeah.
So it was funny. Someone bought me like for Christmas some 23andMe thing, and everyone encouraged that I do, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not comfortable. I don't want my DNA on the internet.
Yep.
But what's interesting
for
is
you,
if enough
Paul.
of your family
Yeah,
does
if
it.
any of your family
Doesn't
does
matter.
it.
Yeah, I get like enough information where I'm like, cool, I don't have to do it. It's like we're family, and like whatever, right?
God, I'd be
so I never
mad
did.
if my brother did it and then I get caught for all those murders.
Right?
You know,
right?
I'd be so mad about that. Ugh.
But now here we are, like, prove me right. So the story is 23andMe is filing for bankruptcy, and the question is, what happens to all of that data? How, in privacy protection laws and whatever, how do I get my? Can I get my data removed from it? Like, what happens to the?
You can get
All
your
right,
data
so
removed.
tell me.
Yes.
You can. I don't know how. I mean, but I have seen the articles like, here's how you go and delete your data from 23andMe. But can you really confirm that they deleted
You
it?
can't,
from everything?
but you should. Right? You can't, but you should.
Yeah.
Like you should go in
So
and
there's
request that data be removed.
right. So I know both Jeff and I have articles on this. The article I posted was an article from the Chronicle that basically gives you the steps to go through their channels that remove the data, including it has a validation step. And one of the things they mentioned is they have your DNA sample, and whether you told them to destroy it or not, you can change that. There's a thing you have selected whether your data can be shared with for research and stuff. You can revoke all those permissions, which you should. And then there's the delete everything about me. And there's even a download my data button that you can do. It's because it's the California Privacy Act stuff. I'm pretty certain that it really will delete your data, but I'm not. I wasn't born yesterday. I was born the day before, so I could be fooled. Right. I'm with you, Jeff. I'm a little skeptical, but I'd still go through the dang process anyway, just because otherwise
Did it make you feel better?
Well, I would take screenshots of you doing it too, right? And like of all of those things, and in the event that data is not deleted, and you want to be included in some future lawsuit or something like.
They send you a confirmation email too. But you're right. Keep a copy of the thing, as Bill said. And as Jeff said, be healthily skeptical.
For sure.
That's not the right phrase, but I think that
I get skeptical when a company files for bankruptcy like that.
Yeah,
'Cause they're in kind of like a emergency mode. And I mean, I'm sure they had something that said they wouldn't sell your data, right? But when you're filing for bankruptcy, anyone can acquire
whatever
the assets.
It's an asset, right?
Right.
And
And guess what their
do
key
they adopt
asset
the
is?
same do they adopt the same policies? Do they not? Right. So
Right.
it's better to
Which
just get
begs the question: did they do Chapter 11 or 13?
11.
Of course, having asked that, which is which? One's dissolving the company and one's just restructuring.
Well, so I think I read somewhere that they are for sale, so that would be
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. So
dissolver.
whoever buys them is going to buy getting all the data.
well, and that's why someone would buy them, right? So
So my wife and I were talking about this.
That's the only asset
Which is
they have left.
why they
is
might
data.
not delete it.
yeah,
Right. So
Or they might sell it.
I
If
think
I
it's
were
been
you, I would
a
make
week
sure
or
that
two
it's
ago. We
deleted before-
talked about this, and my wife and I we're talking about it. It's like it's that old. They have their privacy policy, and the new company can update that, and they have that clause. Continued use of our product constitutes agreement to our new policy.
Yep.
Yep.
Which
Oh, that's super shady, huh?
it is, but it's not new. Nowadays, the nice companies say we've updated our policy. Click here to see the new thing, but you still, unless you opt out, you're opted in. But yeah, so I'm thinking the new company will update that policy, and you have no control. The only option you have is deleting the data. And I got to give Shelley credit; she's the one who sent me the article on deleting your data from 23andMe that I linked.
The only solution is not to play the game.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Joshua.
So speaking of playing the game, funny.
Hopefully, I was going to say, hopefully it says funny when it's. I think it's your story number 9, right?
Yeah, funny or silly or holy crap. 73 vulnerabilities.
Let's do funny silly first.
Funny silly is spinning cat. So this repository contains a chaotic JavaScript that plays an audio file of a cat song, which I have yet to actually get working in a browser, but spawns a spinning cat GIF all over the page, flashes neon green screen intermittently. I think this is a great prank to play on your friends. It would work great in a Ducky script. And I put up a thing that I'll probably take down. Hold on, let me go to it. Did you guys see this?
No.
Josh needs to add this to I Hate My Labors.
Oh no!
All right, so here's
you remember that, don't you, Larry?
Here's it running on my it's running on my website right now. It actually takes the elements of the website and includes it in the crazy cat thing. But again, this is a great thing to inject in a Ducky script. Just want to play pranks on your friends. I think it's awesome. This goes back to shenanigans.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like we just want shenanigans.
This is wonderful.
Right? This is a great shenanigans.
Somebody made this. Like somebody put
right. Someone spent time making this, dude. Bill's right. We have to give people credit. We have to use.
It looks
this.
AI generated to me.
The new entry on the uselessweb.com has got to be this one.
Yeah.
Right.
If you want it, somebody made this. Go to the uselessweb.com and yeah, there you go.
Right.
You've got to fit this in a lab, Larry.
And you can download all the files of Java and you can run it locally on your system. So you should do that.
Yeah.
That's
cool, silly. It's cool.
It's cool, silly, right? My serious story was Grub bootloader. Now, we covered this when it came out in February. However, this is very concerning for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't think even the Phoronix article, so Michael Larabelle from Phoronix, more so did some of the research, was good. Thank you, Michael, for pointing this out. Because I pointed it out and then I forgot about it. But Michael's look, there were 73 vulnerabilities that were fixed in the Grub bootloader in February. Wow. And he's but none of the distributions show any evidence of adopting these patches.
What?
And I'm oh, wait, what are you talking about? So he says, while public 1 month and the patches were committed to the Grub Git code base, which I observed as well, no new tagged Grub version has yet to be published. So they issued the patches, but they haven't published a new release from Grub. And certainly none of the new releases of distros rather have adopted any new releases. So he says, in fact, no new Grub releases since 2.12 released almost 15 months ago. And I'm Michael, I don't believe you. I'm I can't believe this is true. I'm let me just do a spot check. So I checked. I updated all my systems this morning. I mean, it's almost like a daily routine for me. Mm-hmm. I update all of my systems. I fix what blows up. I know it disrupts my workflow.
Welcome to Linux on the desktop.
But one could argue if you did this on any operating system, it would be a similar.
You don't have to. You don't have to on the other ones, but go ahead.
No, you would argue that.
You just Oracle. You
running to a group chat near you.
I patched in 2014. That's good enough. It's totally fine, right? So I checked my systems this morning, all freshly updated. Spot checked one. On version 2.12-3 of Grub. The build date from the package is October 2024. And these 73 vulnerabilities were disclosed in February of this year. So this means the distribution maintainers have not backported any patches. Even if they had backported a patch and called it 2.12-4, right? I would have seen an updated build date for that package because they would have backported the package.
Listen,
I did not see that.
If you want to know the build date of your Grub on your operating system, you need to go
wrong with you?
Paul's class.
Come to me. I'll show you how to do that.
Yeah.
It's one command. It's great.
Yeah.
But now, the vulnerabilities that were disclosed in Grub 2 in February, some of them can be used to bypass secure boot. In fact, I think I covered it on the show, right? Several of them were like, I can bypass secure boot. I just want to also note that if you're sitting there as a Microsoft Windows user and you're like, whatever, Paul, you're talking about this Linux bullshit, whatever. If you take this Grub 2 bootloader and you put it on a Microsoft Windows system, if Microsoft Windows secure boot process hasn't put a DBX entry in, hasn't updated the SBAT to say that this bootloader can't work, I can bring my own bootloader to your Windows system, have it filled with 73 vulnerabilities that I can then exploit to then bypass secure boot. Now, I was like, well, wait. How do I implement a policy on Microsoft Windows systems that prevent an attacker from any Grub bootloader of any version being used on a Windows system? I didn't get very great answers from many of the LLMs, and I'm not 100% confident on this. However, they did list an SBAT entry that you could use to do that. So SBAT allows you to specify software that should be excluded from secure boot. So you give it a name, you give it a version number. And the version number that they put, the LLM put, was 99,999. So if you set the version number to the highest value you can, that means all versions of Grub
prior to that,
because you set the version in the highest number, won't be allowed to boot on your system. Now, I didn't test this in any shape,
Is that
form, or
a
fashion.
64-bit integer or a 32-bit integer?
That's a great question.
Can I just use -1 and have it round?
Maybe. I didn't test this. I'm not saying this works in practice. I'm just saying I'm proposing it as a strategy to protect your Microsoft Windows systems from someone bringing their own vulnerable bootloader to set an SBAT policy that says, don't run Grub.
So
again, I put an example in here, but I'm not confident that it's perfect.
So here's a question, Paul, and you might know this a little bit better than me. Could it be possible that the reasons why none of the distro maintainers have updated to new versions of Grub and are leaving this version of Grub that are vulnerable to be used to bypass secure boot
spies
may be required for specific functions in Linux with, say, unsigned kernel drivers? Because
depends on your distro.
Could this be an intentional non-update because it removes the ability for the Linux system to have some of its functionality?
Shim exists to enable secure boot on those systems, which is like the bootloader before your bootloader. So you would typically Microsoft signs Shim, and then Shim has its own internal mechanisms to allow the versions of Grub that should be allowed to boot. And I haven't seen that trickle down where Shim says I'm not going to boot with Grub version 2.12 because it's vulnerable. Right. I haven't seen any evidence of that. And also, certain Linux distributions leave it up to the user to be like you're on your own to enable secure boot. In which case, you would sign on your own and build the root of trust on your own, which is a huge pain in the ass, and I don't really recommend it. But Ubuntu, for example, will support secure boot using Shim and works well. I have had good success doing that. But I think all of these distros and Windows are vulnerable because there's no evidence that they've told secure boot not to use the vulnerable versions of Grub bootloader. Right. That's my concern with this whole thing, is that we can kind of throw secure boot out the window right now if there's 73 vulnerabilities in Grub and none of them have been added to any revocation list and no one's done anything to say it shouldn't be part of secure boot. Maybe I'm speaking on a turn, I don't know, but that's my assessment of it, which is kind of scary. So yeah,
here we go.
And there we have it. So I don't know what's going to happen with this. I'm kind of worried right now because there's probably
is that what that smell is?
Probably attackers listening, going, "Oh, wait, I can bypass stuff with secure boot." And I thought I had another story that I tied this to. Oh, I did. Well, first, my story number 10 and 12 kind of relate to this, because if you want to bypass operating system controls, kernel or not, a bootkit or UEFI rootkit is before the operating system loads, as we've discussed. So bypassing Windows Defender with WDAC, I forget what that stands for, but it's in the article. This is a great article. My story number 10 is a great article about bypassing Windows Defender application control. Is a security solution that restricts execution of trusted software, to trusted software, I should say.
Right.
Since it is classified as a security boundary, Microsoft has a bug bounty program. Article goes on to talk about historically who's found bypasses to this, and introduces a new bypass that essentially, because Teams is a trusted application in WDAC, if you load JavaScript through Teams, you can load a Loki C2 backdoor communications channel, and it will inherit the trust of Teams.
Sick. That's so
and be trusted,
yes.
right? You have to go to this article. It's friggin' awesome. And again, like, I do my best to cover Windows stuff because I'm not a Windows person, but I read this, I studied it, and I was like, that is awesome. So go read that story. And that, again, makes me kind of concerned as to bypassing roots of trust for software. Also, my story number 12, which came from a LinkedIn post, which is another inside joke, but I trace it back to a company that's doing God's work, right, in creating a Linux driver in Rust that detects malware. And if you go back to a couple of years ago,
There's so much to unpack there.
So much to unpack. But if you go back to when Hal Pomerantz was last on the show, Hal has forgotten more about Linux than I will ever know. That's how much Hal knows about Linux and Unix systems. He and I had a conversation and was like, if we put these detections inside the Linux kernel, that's great. And he was like, but Paul, if an attacker gains enough privileges to manipulate the Linux kernel or gets in before the Linux kernel, all those detections and preventions mean absolutely nothing. And then now we have a Rust Linux kernel driver that can detect malware, which is awesome research, by the way. I mean, for a lot of reasons, right? Like, Rust is a great language. It's memory safe. They've tuned it to detect malware, which I think is great because not enough people are looking at detecting malware on Linux systems.
Hey, Paul, I got to interrupt you for a real quick second here. Lee, it's not nap time yet.
I'm still jet lagged.
I know you are.
Lee's in a different time zone.
He
man.
is. I know he is.
To Lee's body is probably 2:00 in the morning. And any one of us would be asleep.
So about that,
okay.
yeah. I was 7 hours off.
So, but my thing with my story number 12, which is awesome, you should read it, but is that if an attacker gets in before the operating system, an attacker can, like a bootkit or UEFI malware, they get in before the kernel, they can disable this module, they can run their malware, they can make this module blind to their malware, similar on Windows as well. That's my only point of my 3 stories that tie together. All right, I'm done talking for a while.
Bullshit. I don't believe it for a minute.
Is it
I'm
time
done
for
talking
the
for a hot
PCI
minute.
minute?
That was the
5.
pause right there. That was the pause of no Paul right there.
That's
Go,
it.
Paul,
That's it.
go.
Now I'm back.
I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Christ.
So this is why I'm concerned. I'm concerned for everyone based on all those things I presented. And if you feel otherwise, I want to hear from you. If you disagree with me, that's totally fine. I want to make our systems more resilient. And if you're like, Paul, that's bullshit, I know how to make our systems more resilient. Fuck yeah, let's do it. But right now I'm concerned, right? And if you can help alleviate some of those concerns, we want to have you on the show, right? Like that's basically what it boils down to. Okay, now I'm really done for a minute.
Hey, so let's hit Jeff's stories number 10 and 11.
Yep, that's where I wanted to go too.
Refresh my memory what they were.
Ingress
Nightmare.
Ingress nginx.
Yeah, a lot of people had the Ingress nginx story.
Yes.
I had it Monday because I had it under embargo, but I couldn't. I had it last week. This is the embargoed one.
Larry, please.
Yeah, I sure wish you would have shared that.
I did share it on group chat.
In the group chat.
Dude,
Your message expired, Bill.
Listen.
Bill, your message expired. Sorry.
He shared it and disappeared.
I was trying to give you a solid there. I was trying to do you a solid there.
That's right.
I literally shared it on a Signal group chat. And
and
as far as I know, there were no reporters on the chat.
Right.
No, there's where you went wrong.
I think we're all reporters.
No, I added one the other day.
I think we're all reporters. All of us.
We are all reporters.
Wow. Well, shit.
So, Jeff, tell us about it.
No, I published it.
No, I was like, no.
You guys talk about it. Well, I mean, I tried to read through it, and it was of interest to me because I've been having an argument with a client lately that thinks that all they have to protect is the software that's running in the cloud and not the systems that it's running on, even though they're virtual and the virtual network. And I'm like, where I come from, you got to look at everything because bad guys can exploit everything. And we talk about vulnerabilities on everything. But they're like, well, but it's in the cloud. And I'm like, boom, nginx. Here you go.
Yeah.
And what percentage of, cloud instances are using nginx based on that Cloudflare data from earlier, Paul?
Well,
I'm going to make you do math.
A lot.
A lot.
That's my answer.
Yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody that read the article and is more technically astute about this stuff, but it just seemed like there was a trust relationship between what it is that they exploited. Somebody figured out, hey, I can just bypass it and pretend to be it and get right on, basically
but
spoof the thing that's trusted and go right to the source and get in. That was
this is your Kubernetes ingress controller, not the nginx web server.
That's right.
Right.
But
so it's like the authentication server letting people access things. So compromising that is clearly very serious, like compromising a domain controller.
Never happened.
I saw somebody reference Wiz as GWiz now, and I think that's amazing.
Oh.
Oh, GWiz.
They need to have a product called Cheese Whiz.
Cheese Whiz.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
You got my Cheese Whiz, boys? But if I can use this, because I brought up client, and it's a PCI client, you promised I could talk PCI for a few minutes, Paul. Even though I don't have an article linked to it. But
did you promise he could do it on the air?
I promised you could do it on the air. I didn't promise I wasn't going to interrupt you, though.
Oh, feel free to interrupt me because you're a dick.
Wow. For the record, the comments that we got here did they ever say it was Paul that did the intro?
Oh yeah, no. Okay. I went back and listened, and I interrupted Josh because he was on a tangent out of control, and I had to reel the reins in on it, which is a quote from like episode 50 or something of this podcast. It was in fact a tangent out of control. I had to reel the reins in on it.
So we can't just have inside jokes. So we got some feedback from Donnie Clayton that said, "What's up with cutting Josh off at 4120? That's kind of a dick move." And that's so funny.
And I was like, who interrupted Josh? Like, who's being? I'm like, oh, it was me. I'm like, but it was a tangent out of control. I had to reel the reins in on it. So
it's your show.
I did.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep us moving. So, Jeff, 3 minutes on PCI, go.
I can't do it in 3 minutes. So,
there's a joke there somewhere. They have a pill for that, Jeff. Wait, no.
I can do it twice. Anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
That doesn't count against 3 minutes, by the way. So, version 4 of PCI came out in 2022, became effective last year, April 1st of 2024. But all the new requirements become fully effective April 1st this year, which is 5 days from now when we're recording it. Whenever this is recorded, dropped, it'll only be 3 or 4 days. There's some pretty significant changes that people in theory have known about for years, but there's also been kind of I love and respect the PCI Council, and they frustrate me at the same time, but they had this huge fuck up, basically. And it'll take me 3 minutes just to try to frame the problem.
No, you have 3 minutes total.
No, I'm going to keep going, and you're not going to cut me off. So the new requirements came out in the PCI standard that are become effective next week that start to focus on the client side of a web browser experience, because modern architectures build everything in the client browser, and part of that is built with JavaScript. And hackers and bad guys figured out back in like 2017, 2018 that they can exploit these scripts because nobody looks at them because they're on the client browser, not on the server. And launch attacks, which are essentially very often sort of man in the middle of attacks. They modify the code, and so you're a consumer, you're buying something, and you think you're buying something because you really are, but everything that you're entering in terms of your payment information is being intercepted. It's still being passed on. You still get your widget that you're buying from Amazon or whatever. Not to say that Amazon's ever been hit by this. It's a type of attack called a mage card attack.
I was going to say, this is the mage card attack. Basically, in the web application,
it's web skimming is what we call it.
Yeah, they take control of some component
JavaScript.
and are called to a JavaScript to inject some JavaScript that runs in the local browser that then attacks the payment process, because all the JavaScript runs locally in the browser on the user system.
And it's not subject to alerting and monitoring that's happening on the server.
Yeah, because it's executing in my browser on my system.
Right. And so this came out in 2022, and a lot of us were like, oh, this is really cool. They're actually being progressive and looking forward, and many of the changes that they made in version 4 to sort of update to the 21st century and acknowledge modern architectures, like there's no longer mentions of firewalls, routers, and switch, because so much of it is security groups and cloud environments these days. They just call it network security controllers, NSCs. So a lot of good things happened. Then they put out the self-assessment questionnaires version 4, and for the lightweight self-assessment questionnaire SAQ-A, which many merchants rely on that just do e-commerce, that basically says you don't really have to do much as long as you're using an iframe or a redirect to a third party. And so all the payment information is on them and not on you. None of that information is traversing your website at all. You basically have to just validate that they're compliant and you're done. But they added these two requirements that start talking about the client side stuff, and they said, no, you're responsible. But whoever wrote the SAQ was a different person than wrote the data security.
What's the SAQ again?
Self-assessment questionnaire.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're a smaller merchant, you do self-assessment. It's where the whole idea that PCI is a checkbox comes from, because there's more smaller merchants than there are larger merchants.
Right. Yeah,
Initially, when version 4 came out, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but the data security standard says this requirement applies whether you do an iframe or a redirect on the one side, but then in the self-assessment questionnaire, it only said the iframes. So they had to come out with a version 4.01 to get the two to agree. And then there was some question on, what are we talking about? What JavaScript where? And so, those of us trying to figure it out, the payment page is what they refer to. That's the part where you're typing in your credit card information, but that's the part that's inside the iframe that's given to you by a third party. So a lot of merchants were saying still, well, that's not us. We don't have to do that. Why are you talking to us about it?
Yeah, it's Google Pay, it's PayPal, it's Shop, it's Amazon, right?
Right.
I've used all those to buy stuff online.
So there was enough flack that the council received on it's too complicated, it's not going far enough. About 2 months ago, they issued a new version of the self-assessment questionnaire and ripped those requirements out. They said, never mind. But they added an eligibility requirement that says you need to make sure that you can validate that you're not vulnerable to these types of client-side mage card attacks. So then everybody's like, what the hell does that mean? Then they put out an FAQ, frequently asked questions, trying to clarify things, which didn't. Then they put out supplemental guidance on how to apply 643.1161, which just only came out in the last week or two. And for the first time, they don't talk about the payment page. They talk about the parent page, which is where the iframes are embedded into your website. And they're saying all the JavaScripts that are associated with that parent page is where you have to start. The requirement is you have to inventory all the JavaScript. You have to validate that they haven't been altered or modified, and you have to have a justification for them, which is technical work that SAQA merchants don't usually have to do, because all they have to do is sort of a paper exercise to sign off. And
So my question, Jeff, is like, what do I do? Let's say I wanted to sell some merchandise on my website, and I want my payment processor to be Google Pay.
Right.
I don't want anything to do with collecting people's credit cards. When you buy your, I don't know, whatever it is, Hack Naked T-shirt, if we were to start selling those again,
Right.
I would go, when you get to the payment process, I've included some JavaScript from Google. Go process your transaction.
You include an iframe.
An iframe.
And the iframe might have all sorts of JavaScript, but it's their
JavaScript
code
from Google that lets the buyer process their transaction.
Right. So in our customer's experience buying the Hack Naked T-shirt, they order a dozen T-shirts and they go to checkout. And
a dozen would be great. Yeah,
it would be great. So they hit the checkout button and a little window pop up. That's being presented by the iframe, and that's where all the payment information goes. But that's not going through our website. That's going directly to the payment process.
Right. It's an iframe. I've outsourced that payment process.
But the SAQ was originally saying up until 2 months ago, our website, the part that has the checkout button, let's say, all the JavaScript that's associated with and attached to that has to be inventoried. And it not just yours, it could be from a third party, it could be from a fourth party.
Sure.
And that's where, when they ripped it out, they sort of caused more confusion than they really intended.
Because as a merchant, I'd be like, okay, it's Google Pay. It's the iframe from Google Pay. I inventory it. And I'm like, is that all I have to do?
Well, here's part of the problem. They issued guidance that says we're talking about the parent page, but the term parent page does not appear in the data security standard. In the self-assessment questionnaire, before they ripped it out, they said, we're talking about essentially the parent page, even though they still didn't say that language, but they talked about the web page or the portion of your web server that has the iframes that launch the payment page. That's what we're talking about. But when they ripped out 643, they ripped out that qualifying information and left a whole lot of people scratching their heads. 643 was revolutionary in PCI because for the first time ever, vendors were showing up at the PCI conventions saying, we actually can meet this requirement and we can help you. And they were actually well versed on the nature of the requirement and mage card attacks, and they could talk you through it. And they say, we can help. Never have vendors been able to do that. One of my big frustrations, you may know, is talking to vendors that have no clue how they address PCI requirements. I mean, starting with my work at Tenable. Tenable didn't know when I was there that there was an internal vulnerability scanning requirement as well as that external vulnerability scanning requirement.
You've mentioned that before.
Well, it's stuck in my crawl. So that's a new requirement that comes effective. There's a requirement that becomes effective next week that requires an SBOM. And not only do you come up with some way to scrape everything and come up with this list of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of libraries and APIs and component parts, but you actually have to do something with it to demonstrate that you're using that information to find vulnerabilities. Minimum password length is being bumped to 12 characters. Multi-factor authentication is pretty much required everywhere. Internal vulnerability scans are now having to be done either credentialed or authenticated. It used to be if you had a website, a web-based application, you had the option of either doing web application security testing or implement a web application firewall to protect it. No more. Now you just have to do the web application firewall. You have to have a WAF to protect your.
I would have liked to see it go the other way, but
and that was all in requirement 6, which according to PCI is all about vulnerability management, keeping things secure. Requirement 11 is where all the vulnerability scanning and pen testing happens, and the pen
30
testing
seconds, Jeff.
requirement has
30
always I have plenty of time. Pen testing has always required network layer and application layer level type of testing, so that's all there now. So at whatever application level testing you do, web application testing, it's all done for requirement 11 now, not for requirement 6. So you have to do all of that. Those are the highlights. Ready or not, it becomes fully effective April 1st.
Ready or not,
Here I come.
Awesome. Hey, Bill, tell us about Ray Hunter. You just held up a Ray Hunter.
Yeah.
Did you get the firmware? Did you get the firmware on it? I got 2 of those.
Yeah. So we talked about
Green Line, man.
Yeah,
Green
we
Line.
talked about this a couple weeks ago. And,
but you've been testing it?
Yeah, I've been testing it. So I ordered 2 of these off of eBay. I think they're about
Me too.
$15, $20 off of eBay. They're the Orbic devices, and you're able to install a new firmware that was released by the EFF. Now this is a MC catcher. So if there was somebody that has set up a fake
IMSI catcher,
like an IMSI catcher, like a fake cellular tower, trying to get you to get onto their tower to be able to intercept your communications or whatever, this device or this firmware running on this device will let you know that. So you can see right there that green line would be red if I had something, if I had if there was somebody attacking me at this point. I will tell you, it was pretty easy to install. So what was really interesting, this device, when you connect to it, so this is an Android device. When you get a bash shell on it, that you're already root, right? So now I understand why the EFF
they chose that device.
This device.
It was basically like jailbroken already.
Right?
And it's Android, so it uses ADB to push the firmware to
That's
it.
right.
So you're already like ADB root on.
That's right. It was pretty easy. The only thing that I saw that was a little bit iffy, like. And I'm sure that there is a way to compile it from source and all these kind of things, but you really need to go to the releases page to download the release, because they have the tools there, some install scripts that were there that made it super trivial to do. But $20. I actually this is a project. I actually have a client that believes that they are targeted. So this is something that I'm going to be using as part of part of the job.
That's awesome.
So,
I want to go to vulnerabilities for a moment and just trickle through some of those.
Which isn't a keyword, by the way, or at least it wasn't
real quick,
earlier
Bill,
today.
I got 2. They were $11. One of mine turned out it booted up for the first time. It said welcome, and then it never booted again. So I took it apart to see what was inside of it, and then I ordered 2 more.
They're cheap.
But I did get Ray Hunter, and if you're putting Ray Hunter and you're using an Intel Mac, go find an ARM-based Mac and do it that way. Because the Intel-based Mac script, you have to do all sorts of hackery.
That's funny. So I was using an M1 Mac, and it was a piece of cake. Now, so just one thing to throw out there, they did release a new release 6 hours ago. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to touch on it. Is there has been some updates.
Bill, your story number 4 talks about a tool that I've been using for a long time that I love. It's called cvemap. It comes from Project Discovery. It allows you to query the CVE database and also overlay different information on top of that. I love this tool, Bill. I actually went back to a B-Sides Charm. It had to be, Jeff, 2 years ago I spoke at a year ago I spoke at B-Sides Charm a couple times. I found a reference to cvemap in my B-Sides Charm presentation that gives you basically the command. So if you go to the show notes for this episode, you can get the last 20 days of CVEs, only those that are 9.0 CVSS or above, and an indication whether it's on the SysAkev, and if there's a proof of concept exploit available, all in one cvemap command.
All in one command.
I've been using this tool for a long time.
Just one command that Paul has in there. So in the show notes, Paul puts that command. This tool is incredible. What was cool about this, and so I saw, funny enough, I saw on LinkedIn when I was going and okay, what am I going to talk about? On LinkedIn, I saw a post that talked about how can you identify so CVEs that have a POC, so a proof of concept exploit, that do not have a detection in nuclei. Like so,
right? Because they also list that as a flag. That's a flag in cvemap.
Whoa, how powerful! Like like so, if you're a bad guy, like hey man, those might be the ones to look for, right?
To fly under the radar. Yeah.
Right.
It's great. Use it the other way. I'm using it for defensive purposes, right?
Right.
But yes,
so
that's a great use case.
That was what I saw. So that's how I became aware of cvemap, and then just looking at it, it is incredible. So Paul, you added that command in there that in the show notes that you can see that, but you're able to ask it all kinds of really, really good filters around CVEs. And I think it's a tool worth.
It's one of the few remaining tools that can that have the CVE database hooked into it that actually work. Also, Project Discovery, my story number 11, released a lab environment to test your nuclei scripts, which is similar to a project I presented on the show 5 years ago, right? That it released Docker scripts to spin up vulnerable targets. You can test your nuclei scripts. That's my story number 11. I love to see that work continue. My GitHub repository, I haven't tested in 4 or 5 years. I don't know if it still works, but I put together a whole bunch of scripts to spin up a bunch of stuff in Docker as vulnerable targets. And I haven't gotten back to that in probably 4 years. So it was good to see that work kind of continue. Also, check out VUL Lab is a GitHub that I haven't checked in to see if they're still actively maintaining that. But
is it VU Lab or VUL Lab?
VUL Lab or VU Lab. It's one of those. They've got a GitHub repository that has a whole bunch of Docker scripts for spinning up vulnerable containers. I borrowed from that and created my own. Now that I saw Project Discovery do it, I'm like, I should probably dust off that project and like update it and see if it still works. I went through like great lengths. I actually created a Docker container from scratch for the first time, loaded the root file system from an older Debian that I downloaded to get older software to run in a container to make a vulnerable software container. But again, if you're going, so now you're like, I'm going to go find Paul's GitHub and test that out. I have not tested that in a long time. If you go test it and it doesn't work, let me know. Maybe we can collaborate and get it working again.
That's the power of open source. I don't want to fix this. I don't want to fix this anymore. You fix it.
But also, even if you want to make a bug report, if you're like, Paul, I really want to use this and like shit's broken, like let's work together and we'll fix it. Like that's cool with me. I'm not saying I'm going to support every project I have and every use case for it, but like if we can help me out and fix things together, I'm all for it. I'm not putting all the work on the people who are using it, but I'm also not putting all the work on myself for that project. So we'll meet somewhere in the middle, and if we can fix it together, I'm all about it. There was a couple of stories I had about vulnerabilities, like basically, is it hype? Is it really true or not? And I had 2 stories on this. The first one is my story number 4. So Horizon 3 AI, who I love and respect, right? Like they make a commercial product, but their research is awesome. And they looked at the GitHub Actions and Apache Tomcat vulnerabilities, and they were like, look, we looked at both of those. We looked at our customer environments, and we didn't find a whole lot of vulnerable customers. Now, to give a gauge on their sample size,
according from what you have here, it doesn't say they didn't find much evidence. It said they found no evidence.
Well, they found one customer that had a vulnerable GitHub action. They looked at 10,000 instances of Apache Tomcat and didn't find an instance of it, of vulnerable. But just because some people don't have the vulnerable configurations doesn't mean you should dismiss the vulnerability.
Right.
Like the impact can be great, but a small number of people could have that configuration. But to Horizon 3's credit, and I don't think maybe they did like position it this way, maybe they didn't. But if I have Horizon 3, which is doing like ongoing pen testing, I want that. But it's interesting, like a win for them is if they scan my environment and they don't find a vulnerable configuration, right? That doesn't downplay the severity or impact of the vulnerability. It just means I'm not vulnerable.
Right.
The value in the service is the actual check. And so don't downplay the value of the service if they don't find something that's vulnerable. Like, that's good. The value of Horizon 3 and similar companies' service is they can check for that stuff. And again, we're not endorsed by Horizon 3 in any shape, form, or fashion, but I just want to point out, like, the value of that. Like, I think the value is good. And Horizon 3 has done great work, great research, and that's why I want to highlight them. But again, we're not sponsored by Horizon 3 by any stretch, but they're doing great work.
But they are kind of friends and family. I mean,
I agree.
They posted something today I saw on LinkedIn, some report that they had done that was based on a lot of their clients that they have. And I always, and I comment, I said, I always kind of salivate when I see these things, because I'm always curious to see how many of the things that they found were PCI related, that if their clients were following PCI, and it was pretty much across the board. Although they took some liberties, they have a little bit of bias against vulnerability scanning. Obviously, they're pushing automated pen testing, essentially what they're doing. And there was
I'm on board with that. I know a lot of like automated pen testing gets a bad rap, but again, if you can find that if you can run that on a continuous basis, and it's validating that you don't have a vulnerable instance of that software or a vulnerable configuration, that's good.
Yeah.
I like it.
This has a tie to, so I was on the Counter Surveil podcast on Monday, and audience chimes in with questions, and some portion of us that turned it a little to AMA. And one of those was like, so if you're in a security group, and now your organization is coming to you because you've done such a good job securing stuff that you're not having any incidents, they don't want to pay for it anymore because you're not having any incidents. Right. This reminds me of one of those solutions. Dude. Like, it's like chicken egg problem. You're doing such a great job.
It's like paying the guy $10,000 to hit the machine on the side that makes it work. And it's like,
but there's also like Jericho's blog, my story number 7, is a variation on the overhyped vulnerability. Right. We saw this thing which said like ChatGPT is vulnerable and it can be exploited. And I'm so glad Jericho, and I think this was like a guest post on Jericho's blog by Elizabeth Montalbano. And Elizabeth was spot on in her analysis, because it was like, this was not a vulnerability in ChatGPT. This was a vulnerability in an interface, like a separate software that interfaced with ChatGPT. But the media spun it as ChatGPT has all these heinous vulnerabilities. And when I dug into it, I was like, no, it doesn't. And I added this as a story when it came out. I'm not sure if we covered it on the show or not. And so I'm glad like Jericho and Elizabeth worked together to publish this article, because this is like raising awareness for the right things. We need to look at what is in the hype cycle and make sure that it's not being overhyped. This was 100% overhyped. For sure. Everyone took this as, oh my God, ChatGPT has a vulnerability. I'm like, no. Someone from China, by the way, if you look at the screenshots in there in the GitHub repo, someone from China, and I'm not saying all China's bad. We'll have that conversation next week. But like this particular interface of ChatGPT had a vulnerability, but it was labeled as ChatGPT and OpenAI had a vulnerability. Not true. So we have to do some level setting here, right? Like, it's not always as bad as what the media wants to make it out to be. And I'd like to think that we fact check as much as we can all of our articles to make sure that's not happening. So I was glad to see this article be published. We are over time. So
almost 5 minutes.
4 minutes, 24 seconds. Thank you everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Paul Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
Over and take it to Signal Group.